So not too long after entering Rapture, we do see the monument of the Great Chain again, with the banner that reads, "The Great Chain is guided by our hand." The banner on this monument is driving home the idea that it is man who creates his own destiny and guides the great chain of being. This belief is the very reason why a place like Rapture could have been built at all, of course. And also, I should say that all of these banners, the imagery, the great chain, all that stuff that's in Rapture, it is sucking you into something. It's selling you on an idea, right? And just like how Jack is, he believes the cover story, at least in the beginning, he is just kind of, he's being played, right? Well, the player is not only being played with the story about Jack, but we're also being played with the ideas that are being propagated here. And another fun and interesting side note early on in the game that I couldn't help but notice was the winged staff and snake symbols that are found all over the medical pavilion level of Bioshock. One very important question that many people don't ask is, how did snakes spiraling upward on a winged staff ever become a symbol for the medical profession in the first place? The short answer is, these symbols have nothing to do at all with Western medicine. This symbol is known as the caduceus, or the staff of Hermes in Western esotericism. And this symbol originated from India. The symbol has been venerated the world over and holds a sacred significance for many mystic traditions. I mean, it's such a powerful symbol that we see it all over in the Western world, even though most people really don't know what it means. Here is a depiction of the Greek god Hermes, the emissary and messenger of the gods. Among other things, Hermes is a soul guide whom assists in navigating the afterlife. Every level in Bioshock has its own unique, unifying look and feel, as well as its own theme. And that's essentially what a theme is. From what I have found, almost every level in the game is related to the deities and also the backstory associated with Greek or Roman mythology. There's quite a few connections here. While this isn't a big secret to fans of Bioshock, there are quite a few connections between Rapture, its inhabitants, and the Greco-Roman pantheon, which probably haven't been looked at very closely before. I will be sure to point out some of these connections as we progress through this series. In the West, we are largely removed from this idea of the veneration of the snake. In fact, it is quite the opposite, as the snake is often a symbol filled with negative connotations. To mystics of the East, however, this symbol represents both life and death, and this is an honoring of both major aspects of existence. Not just labeling what we don't want to face as evil, it's actually more complicated than that, but that's a discussion for another time. This image is found on many columns in the medical pavilion. It is perhaps a little more accurate with only one serpent this time, but it is a conflation of two completely different symbols. And we will look at each of these symbols in detail. The actual symbol for medicine is known as the rod of Asclepius. And to the left, this is a statue of Asclepius, the Greek god of healing and medicine. It is believed this deity is based on the real-life Egyptian man, later named as a god, Imhotep. Imhotep was a polymath and is widely considered to have been a genius. Why the Greeks equated him with medicine is still unclear. One thing I have heard about healers in medicine in ancient times was they would hang a sign. I guess parasites were fairly common, and they would hang a sign that would have this staff and a snake. I mean, actually, I think it was a worm, and they would actually they had some way of getting the parasite out of the body, but then they would wrap it around the stick to get it fully out. So they would get something to coax it out, and they would and it would crawl around a stick, and then they would wind the stick. And so I don't know if there's any truth to that, but that's one of the reasons why you have the single snake going around the staff. But what we do know is that the snake has been both feared and venerated in ancient cultures from the East, which brought these ideas from Egypt and through the Persian Empire to the West. So it seems this ancient veneration of the snake as a symbol of life, death, rebirth, and wisdom, all things, of course, a good healer or doctor would be associated with in the first place, is very much a universal sentiment that has been with us for a very long time. And I should also mention, of course, the symbol on the bottom right is the World Health Organization. That's their symbol. That's the correct symbol. And then the one on the top right you're going to see that on ambulances. So those are the actual medical symbols. The two snakes is actually, well, I'll show you. It's Kundalini. So here's a modern depiction of the Kundalini energy on the left. The word Kundalini refers to a circular patterned energy which moves upward from the base of the spine to the top and then back down again. Kundalini in Sanskrit has also been used to refer to snakes. Notice how the two snakes intersect or meet each other at 6 points in the body or along the spine, which are at, of course, these are the chakra points or the energy centers. The seventh or crown chakra is non-physical, but can only be activated when the remaining 6 come online together. Chakra means wheel in Sanskrit and was written about in the Upanishads of India. So it's a very old idea. Only later, by around the 16th century, was it actually incorporated into yogic philosophy. The interplay and ascension of masculine and feminine energies along the spine through intense breath work accompanied with chanting is used in Kundalini yoga to create what is known as the breath of fire within the human body. This image on the right is actually taken from Bioshock as well. So they actually kind of put a bunch of different symbols in the medical pavilion, and none of them are actually correct for the medical profession per se, but it's always nice to find these esoteric symbols in games. And also, in this same room where I got the last screenshot of the two snakes in the flame, while exploring the medical pavilion some more, or while exploring this area some more in the game, I also noticed the sun symbolism on the faux transom windows above the doorway. It's not the light bulb with the cross which catches my eye, although it does help, but instead the larger outline of the sun just over the horizon, most interesting because it's part of a unified style of architecture and rapture, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I also noticed a shadow on the ceiling, of all things, which seemed rather weird, and I wondered if there was some sort of connection between the sun and this shadow in Bioshock. Now, first of all, the sun symbolism in Rapture, as you probably have noticed, is absolutely everywhere. This is mainly due to the influence of Art Nouveau and the Art Deco styles used in the architecture of the city. Art Nouveau was most popular in the 1890s until somewhere around the 1920s, which by then had fully shifted into the Art Deco era. In Art Nouveau philosophy, and yes, Art Nouveau as a philosophy, just about every aesthetic style has some kind of philosophy behind it. The Art Nouveau philosophy is that style of an object should not be predetermined and imposed, but instead the style should be developed organically through the natural processes of creation. So it should attempt to follow nature in some harmonious way. That's kind of the idea behind Art Nouveau. And while this sentiment seems to be somewhat present with the Art Deco style, it brought its own emphasis on luxury and excess. So after Art Nouveau was mostly done with, Art Deco comes out, and Art Deco still brings some of that style, some of that the natural lines that you see in Art Nouveau, but Art Deco also brings luxury and excess, which is pretty clear, as well as a veneration of man and his technology. So it's in completely appropriate style. They couldn't have picked a better style for Rapture. The use of natural forms is quite prevalent in both Art Deco and its predecessor. So it seems very much in keeping with this style that we should see so much sun symbolism. It should also be considered that a city so far under the ocean would most certainly suffer its inhabitants with a lack of vitamin D. So it seems rather compelling that you'd want some sun, at least in effigy, some sun symbolism, since, of course, sun would be so lacking in a city like Rapture. More importantly, however, when we consider the philosophy from which the city under the sea was built and what it stands for, no architectural style or visual theme could have been better suited for Rapture than what ended up in the final product. There are many of these touches in Bioshock which are often overlooked as mere stylistic choices, but they most certainly contribute to the feeling of a more believable and thus compelling story. So even the architecture itself is making a statement that is in alignment with the philosophy that caused Rapture to be built in the first place. It's just brilliant. The architecture and art style in this game is sending us a message that coincides with the very theme of Rapture and the ideas of Andrew Ryan. It's a very nice touch, and I think it's often overlooked. And I didn't forget about the shadow on the ceiling. Turns out there's no connection whatsoever with the sun symbolism in Rapture and the mysterious shadow on the ceiling. I enabled the console in-game and went into ghost mode so I could pop my head through the second floor and have a look. And sure enough, right above me was a dead splicer, laying in the exact same position of the shadow. So it seems the mystery has been solved, and there really is no connection. I just thought I'd throw a red herring in there just for fun. And finally, in the medical pavilion, just before the battle with Dr. Steinman, we are being shown the reality of just how far Andrew Ryan's three ideals for Rapture have fallen. This depiction having a rather religious flavor to it, of course. And in this scene, Dr. Steinman appears as some sort of priest performing a sacrifice. He seems completely devoted to a dogma which has completely collapsed around him, and yet he refuses to acknowledge this failure as he shows us the darkest side of the great chain. In this case, we can see that the giant chains here are broken or are otherwise completely disconnected from each other. And I don't know if you remember the scene, but these figures that are up here that are hanging in the air, they actually are revealed one at a time. And Steinman kind of shows one, then another, and then finally the last one. It's very, very telling